That's it. We're caught up.
All right, we are caught up. Beautiful. All right, let's move right on along. All right, your piece.
All right. This is Russell Dobular with Mr. Keaton Weiss filling in for Jimmy Dore, who is out on the road. He has been summoned as a possible special prosecutor in the Epstein case. And he's also doing some comedy. Where does he find the time? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
So,
well, the case is closed, so I guess it doesn't take that much time.
Yeah,
I guess anybody can do it.
Just in and out. Just gonna have coffee with the big guy. So you might remember J.D. Vance really excoriated the EU. This is just a few short months ago. This is back middle of February. Excoriated the EU for suppressing freedom of speech and free expression on social media. Let's hear a little bit of that.
And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own.
Okay, so now to be clear, I don't disagree with anything that he's saying there. But, you know, there are some moments where you really feel like you're taking crazy pills. And watching so many people in the journalism space who should know better bust a nut over that speech at the time, I felt like I was taking crazy pills. Because he probably said more in what he didn't say than in what he did say. Because at this moment that he's calling out, rightly so, the UK as being deeply suppressive of freedom of speech. And he mentions this case that, yeah, you know, I don't agree with that. This person should be able to pray outside an abortion clinic. But I think any reasonable person would agree that that was far less egregious than what the UK was already doing to journalists who had the temerity to report on the genocide in Gaza. This is from Declassified UK. Officers, this had been written in November, so this was about 3 months before he gave that speech. Officers from the counterterrorism unit of the Metropolitan Police raided the home of Asa Winstanley, a well-known pro-Palestine journalist with the Electronic Intifada, and seized his devices under provisions of the UK's Terrorism Act. When Stanley was presented with a letter indicating that the raid was part of Operation Incessantness, that's about as British as it gets, a counter-terror initiative about which little is known. This is not the first use of anti-terror laws to try to silence pro-Palestinian voices in recent months. It follows the detention at Heathrow Airport of Richard Medhurst and the arrest of Sarah Wilkinson in August 2024, both of whom are independent journalists prominently associated with reporting Israel's war on Palestinians. The attacks on journalists are part of a wider pattern of harassment of pro-Palestine activists. This includes the arrest on 1st November of the Jewish academic Chaim Bresheath for alleged support of a proscribed organization after making a speech outside the London residence of the Israeli ambassador to the UK. So he literally singled out the UK and mentioned none of that in a speech that was intended to put the EU and England on notice for suppressing speech. He's literally in Germany, which has committed some of the gravest offenses against protesters and journalists covering Israel, what I would call fairly and objectively. And his biggest issue is that they suppress some people as being anti-feminist. Really? In Munich? That is what you want to call out the Germans for? Now, one of the reasons that that is so damaging is by not mentioning any of those things, he made it very clear that they were not going to bring any pressure to bear regarding those actions. So what did they do? They emboldened the Europeans to take it even further. Clearly, the Americans aren't going to say anything about it. They'll silently cheer it on, sometimes full-throatedly cheer it on. So it's only gotten worse in the UK. This is the Metropolitan Police posted this. Palestine action has now been proscribed by the UK government, and expressing support for them is a criminal offense. This includes chanting, wearing clothing, or displaying articles such as flags, signs, or logos. There are a number of events taking place in London this weekend, and anyone attending should be aware that officers policing these will act where criminal offenses, including those related to support of proscribed groups or organizations, are committed. Under the Terrorism Act 2000, TACT, this just keeps getting more British, the Home Secretary, they call it the TACT Act, the Home Secretary may proscribe an organization if they believe it is concerned in terrorism and it is proportionate to do so. Who wrote this for them? Terry Gilliam?
Yeah.
Proscription makes it a criminal offense to invite or express support for a proscribed organization through chanting, wearing clothing, or displaying articles such as flags, signs, or logos. It is a criminal offense to belong or profess to belong to a proscribed organization in the UK or overseas. Invite support for a proscribed organization. Express an opinion or belief that is supportive of a proscribed organization. That's where it's getting really dangerous, because you could call anything that, right?
Well, they say that about protesters all the time. They say they're terrorist sympathizers.
You're
they
expressing,
say
right?
Yeah,
exactly. Arrange, manage, or assist in arranging or managing a meeting in the knowledge that the meeting is to support or further the activities of a proscribed organization or is to be addressed by a person who belongs or professes to. Wear clothing or carry or display articles in public in such a way or in such circumstances as to arouse reasonable suspicion that the individual is a member or supporter of a prescribed organization. And that's really where, like, sure, man, you're wearing a watermelon shirt, you're carrying a
keffiyeh,
Palestine flag. That's it. You have a keffiyeh, yeah. Well, we have reasonable suspicion based on that. Publish an image of an item of clothing or other articles such as a flag or logo in the same circumstances. So now you put a Palestine flag in your social media profile. Now they have reasonable suspicion.
Well, you really can't do any kind of serious journalism given that
of course
provision,
not.
right? Because how can you report on things?
Right. So this is some video of the outcome of this kind of a law.
My intention is to wave this flag and keep Palestine in the public consciousness right now.
So do you support any prescribed group?
I do not support any prescribed group.
Okay.
I support a free Palestine and the end of genocide.
Look at what his sign said. Israel is committing genocide. Doesn't say anything about any group that he belongs to. That's all the sign says.
All right, this is for everybody at home. Just to pause it for 1 second. Never tell a cop more than what they ask for, ever. When he says, do you support a prescribed group? You say, no, I don't. Don't tell them what you do. He didn't ask what you do, what you do support. Say, no, I do not. That is all you say. That is all you say. You do not volunteer what you believe, because that gives them the chance to interpret what you're saying to mean. Answer yes or no. That's it.
Yep. Any lawyer will tell you, keep it simple.
Yep.
Would lead me to believe that you may be. Give me suspicion
What?
grounds to believe you could be.
What suspicion? That I've got a sign that says Free Gaza, I'm holding a Palestinian flag, and I have a sign that says Israel is committing genocide.
My colleagues explained that the support of this, mentioning freedom of Gaza, Israel genocide, all of that, will all come under prescribed groups, which are terror groups that have been dictated by the government, all right, which we have suspicion to suggest that you're supporting, based on your actions here in the city, with the flags and the posters you've got up, right? If you don't provide us with your name and address, those are necessities for us to arrest you for offences against terrorism acts for being part of a prescribed group. Express an opinion or belief that is supportive of a prescribed organisation. Now that you have done.
But that's ridiculous. You can end up arresting half the country
I didn't
for
make
that.
the legislation. If you're found down the high street later on, you'll probably find yourself arrestable for that offence. Because you've been warned not to.
So I can never do this again in Canterbury, in Kent.
It's an offence.
But now I can never hold this in public ever again.
Holding a flag, if you had just a flag, we'd probably say, be careful what you do.
Free Gaza?
We'd probably say, be
What about
careful
that?
And a sign of Israel committing genocide would be in line with
what you're doing is giving us suspicion. We only need 2 out of 10 to give us suspicion that you support a Palestinian.
Amazing.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
Okay, so where's Douglas Murray, this great defender of Western values? Where are all these anti-woke people? Where are all these douchebag dialogues people? Where are the trigonometry guys? Talk about how against the Western values that they are championing this is. What if a video like this came out of a Muslim country? What if a video like this came out of China, where they're rousting somebody for expressing a political opinion like that? They'd be all over it. You see, this is why cultural relativism is bullshit, frankly. We have values in the West that protect people from this kind of treatment. You hear a word from any of these people?
Because we
any
don't.
of these Western defenders?
Yeah. Don't challenge this chud to a debate. Did that cop look like he was in a debate club in Harvard? Well, you could interpret what you say. You don't get paid to interpret what people are saying. It's just so absurd.
Exactly.
So absurd. Wow. But yeah, they could say, so Free Gaza is, I mean, it's beyond insane. That is just beyond insane.
Of course.
They're cops. They can say whatever the fuck they want.
That's what they want to bring here, man. That's what they want to bring here. What do you think the ICE people are going to do once they're done throwing all the migrant farmers to the alligators?
Mm-hmm. They're going to start harassing activists, protesters.
Protesters.
Yep.
More than 70 protesters across UK arrested for allegedly holding signs supporting Palestine action. Now, given the sign we just saw, we can assume most of these signs probably said similar things. There's a genocide going on in Gaza and so on. Not that they should have the right to arrest them, even if they did have that on their sign. This is Defend Our Juries that's been organizing these protests. Breaking 40 arrests in Parliament Square. Over 300 police officers have been seen to carry away dozens of people from the foot of statues of Nelson Mandela and Gandhi for alleged terrorism offenses. Those arrested are accused of holding signs in support of Palestine action. Protesters gathered for the second week in a row in central London after police reiterated that showing support for the group was a criminal offense, resulting in the Metropolitan Police making 42 arrests. The action was organized by the campaign group Defend Our Juries, which said more demonstrations were due to take place elsewhere in London and in Manchester, Cardiff, and Derry. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, announced plans to ban Palestine action late last month, days after activists from the group allegedly broke into RAF Breeze Norton and defaced 2 military aircraft with spray paint. MPs voted in favor of proscribing the group on 2nd July. The House of Lords backed the move without a vote the following day. UN experts, civil liberties groups, cultural figures, and hundreds of lawyers have condemned the ban as draconian and said it sets a dangerous precedent by conflating protest with terrorism. The ban means Palestine Action has become the first direct action protest group to be banned under the Terrorism Act, placing it in the same category as Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and the far-right group National Action. So whether you are treated as a terrorist really depends on whose interests you're serving, as we see here. Hala Jabbar posted this. Under UK law, HTS remains a proscribed terrorist organization. Its leader, Al-Jilani, an ex-ISIS figure implicated in brutal atrocities, is subject to that designation. Yesterday, British police arrested 20 people for terrorism offenses, including an 83-year-old woman holding a protest sign. Meanwhile, the UK Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, met, shook hands with, and held talks with Al-Jilani, a former ISIS Al-Qaeda leader. If you're wondering how that adds up, the answer's simple. Terrorist status depends entirely on whose agenda you serve. Exactly. You can always get in their good graces if you're willing to serve the interests of empire. We've installed a former Al-Qaeda ISIS leader in Syria, and we're okay with that. Some kids go and spray paint a fighter in the UK, and now they've used that as a pretext to crack down on the entire pro-Palestine movement, which they were already doing. For those of us here in America, the course that things have taken in the UK is very instructive. When I went there for the Julian Assange hearings, if you remember, I was interviewing people saying, hey, I'm a little concerned being over here. There's been a lot of suppression of speech here in the UK, and they seemed to think I was being paranoid, which maybe at the time I was, but you could see where it was going. Once the censorship train gets going, it doesn't stop with this law. This law always leads to that law always leads to the next law. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. Frank Zappa said something to the effect that they're only going to maintain the illusion of democracy as long as it's profitable. And once it isn't, they're going to take away all the scenery from the theater, and you're going to see the brick back wall. That's kind of where we're getting now. They give you freedom of speech as long as you don't use it in a way that actually interferes with their plans. This Palestine thing has caused a lot of problems for the plans of the empire. And now you're seeing the true face of the empire. Right now, they cannot have people shutting down their imperial project. As RFK said, RFK Jr., Israel is our aircraft carrier in the Middle East. That was always the Western interest in Israel. There's no moral aspect to it at all. It's a very oil-rich region, and Israel was always conceived as a client state long before it was established. The first Zionists were British aristocrats who liked the idea of A, getting the Jews out of England, and B, having a client state in the Middle East. That is the function that it continues to serve. That's why essentially so many people who are Christian Zionists, who are foaming at the mouth Zionists, are also anti-Semitic. A lot of people don't get the connection. There's a connection. Put the Jews there.
Right. Exactly. All right. I think we are going to Rumble right now, and then we are continuing the show over there. So we'll take a quick break and switch over to Rumble, everybody, and then we got more chats and more show to do. So we'll see you in a few minutes.